for you guys. If everybody else wants to grab your Bibles, open them up to the book of Ecclesiastes. It would definitely help out. So book of Ecclesiastes, we're in chapter 10 as the kids are heading back there. All right. Everybody good and awake now? Good going? I know that those slow songs can really get you comfortable and everything else, but we'll be all right. All right, so as we're looking at Ecclesiastes, we're getting towards the end of this entire series here as we're finishing up it. We're going to knock out the rest of chapter 10 today. We're starting at verse 12 of chapter 10. And today, really, we're going to be looking at the most powerful tool that anybody has, obviously, besides the Lord, which is your tongue. Our mouths can get you into a lot of trouble, but they can also get you out of trouble. That's one of the things that you've always learned a lot is, you always have, some people have that, can just talk their way out of anything. You ever met somebody like that? Can't stand them people because I could never do it. But you also have people who can't stop talking. They talk themselves right into trouble. Okay, quit looking at people, folks. Everybody here is like, I see. Okay, but either, and that's true. It really is. I remember whenever I first started heading down the route of ministry, I was talking to Brother Bill, and he told me, he said, Mark, he said, you're going to be held to a higher standard. He says, it's not right. He said, but people look at a person who's in a ministry position different than they look at everybody else. In all honesty, though, is that the right way to be? Nobody jumps on that, but no, it's not. I mean, all Christians should be held to the same standard. And I hate to tell you this, but if you are a confessing Christian, if you even make the hint that you are a Christian, meaning that you have gone to church once a year, meaning that you actually at any time have hinted towards the fact that you believe in God, then people are holding you to a higher standard. They are. Because Christians are done that way. They hold us up there and they say, oh, you have to live different than everybody else, otherwise you're a hypocrite, right? That's how they do it. So I do want to help you with this. Scripture gives us a lot when it comes to how we're supposed to act. And though Ecclesiastes wasn't written for Christians per se, because Jesus hadn't come yet, it has still got some very good teaching at times of how we should react to things, how we should say things or do things. And so that's what we're looking at. Ecclesiastes, written possibly by the King Solomon, one of the wisest of all people, but at times he was really far away from the Lord. And so we're not going to get a lot of spiritual growth out of this per se, but you'll definitely get some guidance as far as how to live your life. And so Ecclesiastes chapter 10, starting at verse 12 and going to verse 15, I guess I want to start this off by saying, choose your words wisely. Just real quick show of hands. Has anybody ever, put your foot in your mouth before? Anybody else ever done that? Oh, good. Okay. Just make sure it wasn't just me. Okay, here we go. Starting at verse 12. The words of a wise man's mouth win him favor, but the lips of a fool consume him. The beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is evil madness. A fool multiplies words, though no man knows what is to be, and who can tell him what will be after him? The toil of a fool wearies him, for he does not know the way to the city. Now, these are proverbs, okay? And I know this isn't in the book of Proverbs, but that's what these are, proverbs. Short, one-line sentences that basically make a point and then you move on. These are actually all connected, though. You don't see this a lot, but these are actually all connected all the way through the verse 20. We're going to see this. When you first read them, you're going to think they're all separate. But when it comes down to it, he's making a very good point that you should watch what you say, okay? Not easy thing to do. I wish that somebody would have taught me this at a very young age. But either way, let's look at this. Generally speaking, you understand that who you are is seen in your words, right? I mean, if you get down to it, that's really who you are. If you have a person who is very foolish in the way that they speak, well, that's how they think. If you have a person who's wise, which is what we're going to look at right now, then that's who they are. They speak what is coming from their heart. And you can't ever say, well, I didn't mean what I said. Yeah, you did. It's like sarcasm. You guys know sarcasm, right? You understand that sarcasm, there's always some truth in sarcasm. Always. If somebody says something to you sarcastically, they may be joking, but there's truth in it. Now, they may not be right. Please don't take that. Just because somebody says something don't mean that it's right all the time. But there's always some truth when it comes to sarcasm. And you always have to, and I'm going to be honest, read into it a little bit. You should always read into it because you can really find out a lot about somebody. Now, if you take somebody who's sarcastic all the time, they've always got some little snippet to say, what does that tell you about that person? It tells you that that's where their heart is, that in their heart, they've really got this sarcastic mindset, this, well, I got to get at you at any way that I can. Well, real quick, let's look at this. If you're talking about a person who is wise, they typically use their words gracefully. Yeah, typically use their words gracefully, graciously, softly. They know when to not talk. Anybody got that figured out yet? Yeah, it's difficult. I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to show you the most uncomfortable thing in the world for me. You ready? Isn't that odd? Oh, I've got kids in class, cannot stand it. What do they do in class to make up for that? I'll have kids doing. Seriously, folks. If I go to jail for strangling somebody, it will be because of a kid doing that right there. And I can tell you how perfect this is, how we don't like silence so much. In fact, I'm going to be honest with you, I think this goes against God somewhat. I think this shows a sign of who we are, that we can't have silence and be quiet alone with our own thoughts. You're going to see that the younger generations, all the way up, have always got to have music on. Do you know what happens whenever you take in something all the time? You never actually put out. You never have a conversation with, in your mind, hopefully you're not having real conversations with anybody but the Lord. There's some people who are, but obviously in your mind you should only be having conversations with the Lord. But there's so many people, all they want to do is have headphones in their ears listening to music, and that music affects you. Now, I'll be honest with you, a lot of times if I'm listening to something, I'm listening to preaching. Or I'm listening to the Bible. That's what I like to listen to. I occasionally like to listen to music. But I don't have to have it. Shut it off. Spend time with just you and your thoughts, and let's see where God takes you with that. A wise person knows that silence is actually a very important thing. It's something that they've got to have in their lives in order to live their lives right, that it's okay to be quiet. It says right here, the words of a wise man's mouth wins him favor, but the lips of a fool consume him. And I know it's not just talking about what they say, but the fool has always got to have something in front of them. They've always got to have something that's coming out. And you're going to realize that that will destroy you. The characteristics of a fool, you ready? One is they talk too much. And I know you're sitting there listening to me preach, and you're sitting there thinking, Mark, you better be done in 10 minutes. I know that's what you're thinking. So if I'm not done give me a little bit more, 10 minutes, then I won't be a fool. Okay, one is they talk too much. They don't know when to stop talking. Hope and I went on a trip to Colombia this week, okay? We went to Colombia and we came all the way back. It's about a 4.5-hour drive, somewhere around there, 4 to 5 hours. We're driving all that way. We get in the car, we're talking, and then all of a sudden, silence. I'm perfectly fine with that, by the way. It's okay. She's fine with that. I didn't say anything. You thought I was going to take a shot at you. No, I didn't. No, it's okay not to fill up the space with noise all the time. Really, in 5 hours, though we have a very good talking relationship, should we really, 5 hours there, 5 hours back, say, after you stop 7 times? 5 hours there, 5 hours back. Should you really? And it wasn't stopping for me. No, it wasn't. All right, so think about, really? Why did you have to go there?
Because they all thought it was me.
All right, when it comes down to it, if you're going to do, should you really be talking for 10 hours? How many people have 10 hours worth of quality speech inside of them right now? Really, we don't have it. You don't have that many hours of something that's good to say. Now, we could have filled it up gossiping by far, or we could have, I couldn't have come up with that many things to say, but we could have filled it up with things to say that aren't appropriate, obviously. But if you're going to come up with really good talk, and I've told you about that my buddy of mine, James, he was, as far as this goes, he was probably the wisest guy I ever met because he never talked. We'd be driving somewhere, and I'd say, James, what do you think about this? Yeah, I think it's a pretty good idea. And I'm like, okay, dude, you got to talk faster here. It took me a long time to get used to how long he had pauses, but he thought before he always spoke. He never spoke until he knew what he was going to say. A fool always talks too much. A fool speaks without using common sense. It's amazing how ignorant people are. And I'm just going to put this out there, how people will put things out there that you just want to say, are you serious? Do you really believe this way? Do you really think the things that you're saying? People don't have common sense nowadays, and that's a true example of a fool. I think a lot of it is they're brought up in homes that they're allowed to have crazy thoughts. In our home, we do say, okay, that's not a right way to be thinking. You should think differently than that. Or if our kids come home and they've got this gripe about a teacher or they've got this complaint about something, we correct them then. We say, no, you don't have the right to talk to them about that. That person is above you right now. If they come home and they're mad at a coach over something like this, we always explain to them, look, that coach, you may not know what that coach is trying to do with you right now. We try to correct not just their words, we try to correct their thinking. And there's so many people who've never had their thinking corrected. They've never been taught how to think the right way. I'm not saying we're perfect, but we're trying. We're trying to use common sense. We're trying to put everything together for our children so they understand what it is. And the last thing is, whenever you have a fool, they make very dogmatic statements. Basically, they'll make all-encompassing statements, and you're like, that doesn't apply to everybody. Okay? It's like saying something like this, that all bald people are good-looking. Nobody disagreed. Okay, maybe it is true. Next one. Let's do it. Oh, no, the blonde jokes. Let's go back to those in the old days, blonde jokes. Okay, they would basically, please don't get mad at me. This is just an illustration, okay? Basically, it was an illustration that said that everybody who's blonde is stupid. That's really what it came down to, right? Oh, females who are blonde were stupid. That's what blonde jokes were. Well, do you realize there's people out there who really feel that way? And they really feel that, you know, that you can make one statement that encompasses everybody. Or that all Democrats are liberal. Or that all Republicans are conservative. Or, you know, just to go down that list. Or if you're a Bernie follower, then you must have, well, okay, there may be an issue there. But you understand where I'm going with this, is they make dogmatic statements, and these are just straightforward. And I want to say, when I see our Christians and our brothers and sisters in churches that do that, I want to say you're making yourself look like a fool. Because that's how you're acting right now. And we shouldn't. We should watch what we say. James chapter 3 tells us this when it comes to the mouth. It says, for we all stumble in many ways, which is, he gives that credit right here. He says, everybody here is going to stumble. Everybody here is going to mess up. He says, and if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body. So basically what he's saying is, if you can control your mouth, then you're doing it right. That if you can control your mouth, that means that guess what else you can control? Your entire body. What else is there, folks? You're made up of your thoughts. You're made up of your body. If you can control the thing that shows all your thoughts, which is your mouth, and you can control your body, then obviously you're doing pretty good. He says these things. Moving on from there. He says in verse 3, he says, if we put bits in the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we guide their whole bodies as well. He says, look at ships also. Though they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. And what he's saying here is, okay, you guys ever ride, anybody here equestrian rider? You know, if you ride horses, you take this big bit. And I remember when I was a kid, I'd watch Dad. He would take that bit, big piece of metal with straps on the side, and you stick it inside the horse's mouth, okay? You get it all the way up here into this part right here. If they fight you, it cuts into them. It hurts them. They don't like it. And what you do is you sit up on top of them and you pull this way and it pulls their whole head that way. You pull this way, it pulls their whole head that way. That's how you control where a horse is going. And I used to hate watching my dad as he'd put that bit in those horses' mouths. And they would fight and they would argue with them. They would push against them, that type of stuff. They didn't want it to happen. But once that bit was in their mouth, who controlled them? The rider did. All right, so that little bit controls everywhere the horse goes. If you take a ship, you take that gigantic ship, you can see it, and sitting in the back end of that ship, sitting down the water is this nice little rudder. And that rudder would go this way, and the whole ship goes that way. Rudder goes this way, the whole ship goes that way. It doesn't take much to move the entire ship in one direction or another. You and I are the same way. Our mouths can control so much. Think about this. You ready? the difference of a feeling that you get between somebody looking at you and saying, I hate you, compare the difference in the feeling that you get when they look at you and say, I love you. Think about the difference that you get just from that person saying that, not you saying it. And just that person saying that. Think how much that changes your feelings or how things go through you. Just think about that. The mouth is so powerful. And we can do so much good with it, but we choose to do so much bad with it. That's the sign of a fool. And it goes on, it says at the end of that verse, it says, and I'm at the end of verse, I lost my verses there, hold on. Verse 15, he says, the toil of fool wearies him, for he does not know the way to a city. Now that statement, for he does not know the way to the city, is basically the statement of, like you and I would say now, even a chicken knows to get up out of the rain, right? Or even a dog knows to come in out of the rain. That's how that goes. It wasn't a chicken. Yeah, even a dog knows. What does that mean when we say that? Okay, has everybody ever used that statement before? Even a dog knows to come? It means that the dumbest of animals knows that when it's raining to come in out of the rain. Well, the statement that they make right there where it says, for he does not know the way to the city, basically what he's saying is, this is a person who can't even follow the path to get where they need to go. Israel in those days was very well marked. It's like now, if you can't find your way to Bernie, what's that say about you? You're not very intelligent. It's not that hard. I'll be honest with you, if I had to give my keys to my son, no, rephrase that. If I had to tell my son to walk to Bernie, he could find his way to Bernie. At being 12 years old, he could find his way to Bernie because he could follow simple directions. It's not that hard. Well, he's saying a fool is this type of person. He can't even follow it. All right, I'm going to close this part out with this right here. You got to know when it's time to be quiet, okay? You got to know that. That's part of it. And so I'll give you some simple things and we'll move on. First one, you ready? Don't have all the answers. Have you ever met anybody who always has to give you an answer for something? It's very important to be able to say these words, I don't know. It's very important. Just say those words, I don't know the answer to that. Next one, don't have an opinion on everything. We live in a world where everybody has an opinion. How is that possible? I mean, really, how many of us are really well-versed on all these topics in the world when it comes to politics, when it comes to political leaders, when it comes to making decisions on voting? How do we know these things? You know what happens when we have to vote? Hope and I have to vote. You know how this works? I call my dad, okay? Write down stuff. Then we go to the voting polls. Thank you. Really? I couldn't get the poll. Yeah, we go to the polls. And then Hope sits next to me and votes what I vote. That's how we know it. I mean, she's not well-versed on it. I do my best to be well-versed on it based upon the amount of time that I have. But Dad spends the time to study this stuff. And I'll be honest with you, I have voted different than my dad because he's told me the truth on things. You see, you don't have to have an opinion on everything. You don't have to know everything. And lastly, don't talk to fill up time. Did you ever have one of them preachers who just preached and it looks like they're trying to fill up the clock? You ever had them type of preachers? Most of you said no, thank you so much, because, yeah, whatever. Yeah, you ever had the preachers that they preach the entire sermon, it's like, oh, that wasn't long enough, let me say everything again. You ever do that? Yeah, isn't that horrible? Yeah. You don't have to talk all the time. There comes a time when we don't have to. Just stop talking. All right, let's move on from there. Next one, he talks about being weary of bad leaders, okay? And I know this is jumping around a lot. It does all tie together at the end. Verse 16, he says this, woe to you, O land, when your king is a child, and your prince feasts in the morning. Happy are you, O land, when your king is the son of nobility, and your princes feast at the proper time, for strength and not for drunkenness. Through sloth, the roof sinks in, and through indolence, the house leaks. Bread is made for laughter, and wine gladdens life, and money answers everything. Okay, I know there's a lot going on here. He's talking about having a bad leader above you. We will get back to talking here in a second. This is all ties together. So let's talk about a bad leader. You guys ever have anybody who's been put in charge of you who's horrible at it? Anybody? Nobody wants to say? Everybody has, right? We've all had bad leaders in our lives. There's nothing worse than whenever you look at the person above you and think, I can do that better than them. There's nothing worse than that, okay? And this is kind of like, the joke is that if you're a pastor and you have to go listen to other pastors preach, you know, Pastors typically, I can do better than that. That's how pastors are, because they hear other people preach, and you don't realize how horrible you are until you hear somebody else think, I can beat that, I can do better than that. But it comes down to there are bad leaders. We are always going to have people who are putting positions even though they're unqualified and irresponsible. It's just going to happen. And it happens in everything. And when I say leadership, he's referring to a kingdom, obviously. But in our case, let's take this a little bit further. This could be in a sports program. If you've got captains of your team. If it's at work, it'd be your bosses. If it's at church, it'd be your pastors or your deacons or your elders. If it's at home, it would be the husband, okay? Because that's how Scripture originally ordained it. When you go down the list, there's all these people who are supposed to be the leaders. And we know that there's some horrible ones. And let's look real quick at what he gives us an example of what happens whenever they're not good leaders. He says this, he says, the roof will leak. Okay, what's that mean? Well, it means the roof's going to leak, right? Let's do this real quick. Let's say that our roof in here starts to leak. We have a leak. It happens at times. In fact, you know what? When I first started coming here, Jared was still here. We were talking one day, then we had that ice storm, okay? It was like one of the very first Sundays that I started here. We had church, but it wasn't, it was real bad ice, and we had ice all over the top of the building, and the ice started to slide. It grabbed one of these pipes that are coming up the vent over here. It actually tore a hole in the roof a little bit. Water came in the bathroom, in the men's bathroom. We just left it that way for a couple years. Right? That's how you do it, right? You just leave it. Hopefully it'll seal up on its own. That's how you do it. Well, no. What happened was Jared and I talked about it. Jared said, I got somebody who could fix that. He called somebody on Sunday afternoon, and on Monday somebody was here to fix it so that the next time it didn't leak on that. And that's what he's saying here. If you have bad leaders, they let the roof leak. They're lazy. True bad leaders, if you really look at why they're bad leaders, they're always lazy. Or they're incompetent maybe because they may not be good at what they do, but typically they're incompetent because they're lazy and they haven't taken the time to learn their job. And that's what we run into. If you would look at the breakdown of the house, where God did ordain it, and you can disagree with this all day long, Scripture tells it, God ordained the man to be the head of the household. He put the woman to be submissive to the man. Not less than the man, submissive to the man. It takes a choice on the woman to be that way. Very difficult choice for some women to make. So that's how he originally set it up. Do you know why so many women have stepped up to be the head in the household? Because the men are lazy. Because we have made a society where the man works hard everywhere else, but the woman works hard in the household. What really comes down to it? Which is more important, the household or the work? The household. We've lost our priorities. And so the men have become very lazy. They come home, they want to sit on the couch, they don't want to do anything. And that's why women have taken over, and that's why our society hates the regular household. That's why they don't like it. And what it comes down to is we've got bad leaders. He goes on, he tells us this. He says, how happy are you? He says, how happy are you? He says, woe to you, O land, when your king is a child, your princes feast in the morning. Okay? He's putting this in perspective here. When do you feast? When do you have a big supper? At night, right? Why do we have big suppers at night? What do you have after that? All right, good. Okay, Ian, good. Okay, so you have dessert afterwards. But I mean, after dessert, you go to bed, right? Your belly's full. Now, honestly, he's talking about drinking also. But your belly's full. You're not productive the rest of the day. Well, he's talking about here, you have those people who, they spend their morning times doing this, and they're not productive the rest of the day. There's so many leaders who are just bad leaders. All they want to do is enjoy what's been given to them, and it hurts. Now, let's talk about good leaders then. The opposite would be, if you want to have a good leader, which increases the happiness of everybody, what does that good leader have to have? If the bad leader is super slothful and lazy, what do we want from the good leaders? Nobody wants to tell me. I gave you the answer. They got to be a hard worker, right? They got to be a hard worker. They've always got to be willing to do what needs to be done at the time. Now, I'm going to be honest. Whenever I worked in St. Louis, I was a project manager for construction sites. And we had all these construction sites that were all over St. Louis, folks. And they were all, at one time, I had about 60 construction sites at one time that we were either firing up or finishing up or ending. And it was just a big process going on. 60 sites at one time, cell towers. They had them spread out everywhere. The only time that people called me was if they had a problem. The only time. And I would get a call, and it would be so-and-so working on site number 75, and, hey, we got a problem with this. Okay, let's do this, this, and this. Okay? I'd hang up the phone. Going along a little bit more, somebody else would call me, hey, we got this going on. There's a problem over here. I said, okay, well, let's do this. Or we don't have enough materials. I say, okay, let's try doing this. And that was my job, was to try to fix the problems. Do you know what it got to the point is? When my phone rang, I dreaded it. I hated my job. Because the only thing that I ever got was problems. And yes, I became a bad leader. I would hear my phone ring and think, it's Brian again. No, I never said that, Brian, but yeah, that's my brother. No, I'd hear it and I don't want to answer the phone because it's all problems. But you ready? What was my job? Who was at fault? Was it everybody else? Or was it me? I was being a bad leader. It was my fault. I was being a bad leader. It took me a while to figure that out. That I'm the one who's got to change, not them. I'm the one who's got to do different. So let's do this real quick. Hold on. Leaders often get trapped. And we look down at that verse 19. He says this. He says, bread is made for laughter and wine gladdens life and money answers everything. Leaders often will get caught up in this right here. That if I can have certain things, then I don't have to do my job. I don't have to be a good leader. Okay? Money is a big one, okay? A lot of times when it comes to anything, we tend to think that money will fix the problem. And I want to come real quick to churches. There's so many churches that revolve around money. I was talking to a pastor just the other day who talked about a guy in his church that no matter what was going on, the only thing that guy worried about was the offering for the day. That was it. He was interested, he would talk about how, well, it's the fourth Sunday. It should be a low offering today. And then they had a fifth Sunday, okay, because you only have them every 3 months. They had a fifth Sunday. He said, this should be a horrible, horrible Sunday. We should have a very low offering at church today. This is how this guy was feeling. And he come talk to the pastor about how this is going to be a bad offering. Get ready, this is going to be a bad offering. And then it turned out they had a really good offering that Sunday. And he came to me, he says, this is horrible, Pastor. We had a good offering. Just like that. He said, why is that horrible? I said, that means next week, which is the first Sunday, it's going to be a bad offering next Sunday. And he's like, why don't we just let the Lord take care of it? We tend to get caught up on things like if we have enough. If that's what leaders get caught up, even in churches. We tend to think that it revolves around the money. It revolves around God. And for true leaders to serve God, they have to have faith in God. And so with all that said, we're going to finish this up with this verse right here, verse 20. Even in your thoughts, do not curse the king, nor in your bedroom curse the rich, for a bird of the air will carry your voice, or some winged creature tells the matter. When it comes down to it, you have to use your words wisely, because you're going to have bad leaders. Because if you use your words wisely and you have bad leaders, you're not going to get yourself into trouble. Let me reread this last verse, okay? This is from the Message Bible. Personally, I'm not a big advocate of the Message Bible. I'm not saying this, okay? The Message Bible is a paraphrase of the entire Bible. You can't do that. You can't paraphrase the Ten Commandments. You just can't do it. And so he's paraphrasing these. He puts them not just in layman terms, he puts them in conversation speech as if he's talking to a little 4-year-old kid. I don't agree with that all the time. Occasionally, if you interpret it correctly, this is what you get, and it comes out okay. Even in your thoughts, that's not it. Let me go to it right here. Do not badmouth your leaders, not even under your breath, and don't abuse your betters, even in the privacy of your home. Loose talk has a way of getting picked up and spread around. Little birds drop the crumbs of your gossip far and wide. Okay? So what it comes down to is you better watch your mouth, because do other people hear it? Have you ever said anything about somebody and didn't mean it, but they found out about it? Okay, none of you have ever done that. Okay, I've done that once or twice. Have you ever said something in confidence to somebody else and they go blab it? You ever done that? That's right. Now, if you're talking about a friend, yeah, you could lose a friend over it. I know people who have lost friends over this right here, who have said something that they didn't think that that person was ever going to find out, and it destroyed them, destroyed their relationship together. But if you're looking at it when it comes to leadership, and you badmouth your leadership, I'm not talking about me, folks. This is not having anything to do with church. Are they going to find out? He says it's kind of like little birds. They're going to take the crumbs and they're going to drop them everywhere. Yeah, and that's how it works. And this is how it goes. I've got a problem with. Now I'm not going to use you, Brian. I won't get your feelings hurt. Jackson. Jackson, you're not sitting up here. I can't pick on you. All right, so I got a problem with Jackson because he's my boss. Well, I'm going to sit and talk to Brian about it, and we're going to talk about it. I can't stand Jackson. What am I going to say about it? I can't stand people who are strong. All right, so there we go. People who are strong are ignorant. That's how I did it. And then Matt goes and tells Casey. Casey's going to tell Hope. Hope's going to tell Cheryl. They work together. Angel. And Angel's going to go tell Charles. And next thing I know, Charles feels like he needs to go tell Jackson about it. And guess who it all comes back to? It takes milliseconds for them to track it back to the person who originally said it. But in all honesty, it will track back on you and or onto you, onto you, onto you, onto you, onto you, and then onto me. So every single one of us in this are the ones who end up looking bad from this. All because we couldn't do that one little thing. Stop talking. Because it feels good to make somebody else look bad. It feels good to do these things. And when I'm saying this about your leaders, I'm talking about your coaches, I'm talking about your bosses, I'm talking about your parents, I'm talking about your spouses. It is so easy to talk bad, but God doesn't want us to. We are held to a higher standard. If you're going to be a Christian, if you truly want to be a Christian, then don't endanger the entire group. Don't endanger yourself. Don't endanger your witness to Christ by going around and talking bad. Because we all know that's not what Christians do. Amen? So then why are you doing it? Or why am I doing it? Why do we feel like it's okay for us to just talk bad about others? I don't think that's what Christ wants out of us. I think he wants us to live our lives bringing him glory. It's not always the easiest thing to do. All right, we're going to close here in a second. What we're going to do is I asked Jason if he would play Amazing Grace. Okay? We haven't done this song in a long time. For some reason, I've had this in my head this week. It could have been because I had such a high fever that I was getting delusional or something. But I don't think that's what it was. But I've had the song Amazing Grace on here. And this isn't the My Chains Are Gone version. This is the old version, okay? And I thought, you know what a better way to end service than singing this one Sunday. And I thought this would be a good one right here. So if I want to ask you right now, you may not know all the words.